They left behind no world-famous wonders, no marble temples we still visit, no legends shouted through the ages. Yet once, they ruled, they thrived, they dreamed, great empires lost to time, whose stones now lie beneath our feet, waiting to whisper their stories into the quiet night. These are the forgotten empires of the ancient world. Their names are etched faintly in weathered tablets, carved into crumbling stone, or buried beneath layers of dust. And tonight, we will walk their forgotten roads once more. So, breathe deeply, settle in, and allow the mysteries of time and space to cradle your imagination. The morning mist drapes softly over the Anatolian hills, curling through valleys where once stood cities of stone and fire. A light breeze brushes through the grasslands, carrying with it the scent of wild thyme and distant rain. You find yourself standing among ruins long abandoned, their weathered edges softened by centuries. Shards of sun peek through clouds like memories returning to light. In this stillness, beneath a sky painted in hushed dawn hues, the Hittite Empire stirs once more. Long before the rise of Athens or Rome, the Hittites carved a kingdom into the heart of what is now modern-day Turkey. Born from warriors and farmers, merchants and scribes, they called their land Hatti, a name passed down from the people who came before them. Around the 17th century BCE, the Hittites emerged as a formidable force, forging one of the most powerful empires of the late Bronze Age. Their capital, Hattusa, lay nestled among rugged highlands and dense forests. From its stone ramparts, the world opened wide. To the north, the Black Sea. To the south, the riches of Mesopotamia and Egypt. The Hittites stood at the crossroads of empires, and their kingdom would be built on both diplomacy and steel. Their roads wound through forests and plains, linking trading posts, fortresses, and temples in a vast and organized sprawl. Every stone laid was a quiet testament to their skill and vision. They were not merely warriors. The Hittites were architects of order, meticulous record keepers, and thinkers of law and faith. They etched treaties into clay with steady hands, creating one of the world's earliest known international agreements, the Eternal Treaty with Ramses II of Egypt. Two mighty empires, once enemies at the thunderous Battle of Kadesh, found peace not with swords, but with words. And through this act, the Hittites left behind not only victory, but wisdom. They were among the first to codify laws that went beyond vengeance and punishment, offering nuance, even compassion. Their legal system accounted for social class, family matters, and even animal welfare. A world governed by clay tablets and reasoned debate. A civilization that sought harmony as much as strength. Religion permeated their world like gentle rain soaking into earth. They worshipped a vast pantheon, 1,000 gods, it was said. Storm gods and sun goddesses, deities of grain, rivers, and fertility. Each village had its protectors, each region its sacred rites. Their temples were not colossal but deeply revered. In quiet chambers lit by flickering oil lamps, priests performed rituals with careful rhythm, calling upon the divine to guide their harvests, their wars, their fates. And it was the storm god, Tarhuna, who stood above them all, the thunderous heart of the skies, bringer of rain and victory. Depicted with a triple thunderbolt in hand, his presence was felt in every clap of thunder and summer storm. The Hittite kings believed they ruled by his will, and their armies carried his symbol into battle. Yet their strength lay not in divine right alone, but in cunning and adaptation. They absorbed the innovations of their neighbours, the chariots of the Mitanni, the scripts of the Mesopotamians, and wove them into their own unique tapestry. Hattusa's city walls were a marvel of the ancient world, Massive limestone foundations anchored mud brick towers, encircling the city in layers of protection. Great gates pierced these fortifications, each one sacred. The Lion Gate, adorned with statues carved from living stone, still stands today, its guardian beasts weathered but proud. And the King's Gate, where reliefs of warriors once watched as nobles passed into the heart of the realm, whispers of forgotten ceremonies and silent processions beneath the stars. Inside the city, granaries and palaces, temples and workshops pulsed with life. Traders brought tin and textiles, oxen and oils, filling markets with the clink of copper and the fragrance of spice. Children ran barefoot through courtyards. Scribes hunched over damp clay, pressing symbols into tablets with styluses of wood and bone. A world of breath and motion, now still as the stones themselves. Their language, once undeciphered, speaks to us again, thanks to thousands of tablets uncovered in the ruins of Hattusa. Written in cuneiform, these texts reveal treaties, myths, prayers, and royal decrees. Among them are stories of gods who journey through the underworld, of heroes who seek lost siblings, of kings who wrestle with their mortality. The Hittites, though now forgotten by many, spoke to the cosmos in poetry and purpose. They left behind no single great monument, no towering ziggurat or eternal pyramid. Yet their influence echoed far beyond their borders. They challenged Egypt's might, influenced Assyrian law, and spread technology that would shape the future of war and governance. In the grand mosaic of the ancient world, the Hittites were a golden thread now faded, but not lost. And yet, like all things bound to time, the Hittite Empire began to unravel. Around 1200 BCE, in the great collapse that swept across the ancient world, Hattusa fell. The reasons remain uncertain. Drought, rebellion, foreign invasion, perhaps all at once. The capital was abandoned, its buildings crumbled, its libraries buried. The empire faded, and for over 3,000 years, silence fell over the land. Even their name was forgotten, until rediscovered by archaeologists digging through dust and memory. But the stones remember. In the hush of Anatolian mornings, the echo of horse hooves still lingers. The scent of rain on old roads carries the memory of kings. The wind that moves through broken archways carries whispers of forgotten prayers. And beneath your feet, in the hush of dreams, the Hittite Empire still breathes. As the sun lifts gently over the hills, casting golden light on time-worn ruins, you feel the hush of history settling like a warm blanket. The world is quiet again, the storm has passed, and the forgotten kingdom of the Hittites returns to sleep beneath the soil. The air is cool in the early hours, soft and still. You stand atop a low ridge, gazing out over a plain brushed by tall, whispering grasses. To the west, the horizon glows faintly, the coming of morning wrapped in amber mist. You can almost hear the creak of wheels in the distance, the steady breath of horses. Shadows stretch across the land, and through the silence a long-lost empire awakens. This is Mitanni, the kingdom of chariots and shadows. Few today remember the name. It lies like dust upon forgotten scrolls, tucked between better-known powers like Egypt, Babylon, and the Hittites. Yet for over 2 centuries, the Mitanni ruled the lands between the Tigris and the Euphrates, a powerful kingdom rising in northern Mesopotamia and stretching into the heart of the Near East. Theirs was a world shaped by motion. Horse-drawn chariots, swift and elegant, were the crown jewels of Mitanni warfare. They trained their horses with remarkable skill, developing a tradition so refined that their techniques would later influence Indian and Persian cavalry. Charioteers were not just soldiers, but nobles, elevated figures whose prestige depended on mastery of speed, precision, and control. The Mitanni aristocracy likely spoke an Indo-Aryan language, the echoes of which are preserved in the names of their gods: Mitra, Varuna, Indra. These were deities from the same celestial family later worshipped in the Vedic traditions of India. It is a quiet thread that connects distant lands and distant times, a shared sky, a common reverence for divine order and light. But though the ruling class spoke one tongue, the kingdom itself was a mosaic. Hurrian was the language of the common people, lyrical and ancient, written in flowing cuneiform script on clay tablets. And so Mitanni stood not as a single people, but as a symphony of voices, a place where cultures met, blended and evolved. Their capital, Washukani, remains a mystery. Its precise location is still unknown, lost beneath centuries of sediment and silence, but records describe it as a city of grandeur, likely perched near the headwaters of the Kaba River. From here, kings governed with diplomacy and might, forging alliances with Egypt and clashing with the rising strength of the Hittites. In the golden age of Mitanni, treaties were penned in gold leaf and inscribed in reverence. One such treaty survives, a pact with Pharaoh Amenhotep III of Egypt, sealed through royal marriage. Mitanni princesses journeyed south along desert roads, their carriages lined with gifts, ivory combs, lapis beads, and letters of peace. These were not conquests of land, but of goodwill and trust. And yet, this was also a kingdom of warriors. Their chariots, drawn by 2 or more sleek horses, could dart across the battlefield like birds in flight. Warriors wielded composite bows and short spears, their armor lacquered and adorned. The art of war was a dance here, practiced in silence and storm alike. The Mitanni knew when to strike and when to vanish like mist. Their society was built upon hierarchy, but not cruelty. Evidence suggests a legal system with provisions for fairness and ritual, though much of it remains lost. Temples rose from stone foundations and earthen mounds, and within them, hymns were sung to gods who governed truth and cosmic balance. These were places not of spectacle, but of stillness, spaces where human and divine communed beneath a starlit sky. The Mitanni legacy is not carved in monumental stone, but pressed into clay, letters to Egyptian pharaohs, contracts for land and cattle, prayers whispered in moments of drought and harvest. They remind us that memory is not always thunderous. Sometimes it is soft, subtle, almost hesitant, a candle flickering in the wind, but time is a patient tide, and even the swiftest chariots cannot outrun it. The Mitanni, for all their grace, were caught between rising giants. The Hittites pressed from the northwest, the Assyrians from the southeast. Their alliances strained, their borders fractured, their heartland trembled. In the late 14th century BCE, the Mitanni king Tushratta was assassinated in a palace intrigue. His kingdom, already weakened, fell into chaos. The Hittites invaded, seizing lands and scattering the royal court. Soon after, the Assyrians finished what the Hittites had begun, absorbing Mitanni lands into their growing empire. The name faded. Washukani was lost. The chariots ceased their dance. But in the desert wind, their memory stirs. Somewhere beneath the dust lies the lost capital, waiting to be unearthed. Somewhere in a museum drawer lies a prayer etched by a forgotten scribe, hoping for rain. And somewhere, perhaps in your dreams, the faint sound of hooves echoes still. As you look once more across the plains of northern Mesopotamia, the first rays of sunlight glint upon the tall grasses. A hush falls across the land, as if the earth itself remembers, The chariots rest, the shadows lengthen, and the Mitanni, kingdom of speed and silence, returns once more to its sleep. The desert gives way to green as you wander eastward through a shifting landscape of sun-bleached plateaus and fertile valleys. A river winds below, its waters glistening with the soft shimmer of early morning light. Palm trees sway gently in the breeze, and birds wheel lazily above in the warm, rising air. In the distance, past the golden hills and the shadows they cast, lie the remains of Susa, once the beating heart of Elam. You step softly through the dust, and the land begins to whisper. The Elamites, a name spoken quietly in the shadow of greater powers. To the west, Babylon. To the north, Assyria. And yet, long before these giants cast their influence over Mesopotamia, Elam stood, proud and independent, nestled in the mountains and lowlands of what is now southwestern Iran. Their roots reach back to the dawn of history itself, a civilization as old as Sumer, as ancient as the stars. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense, though they had their wars. They were survivors, artisans, and mystics. Their culture bloomed not with the sudden fury of empire, but with the slow grace of deep roots, spreading across the fertile plains of Elam, anchored by sacred cities like Anshan and Susa. These cities shimmered in the light of antiquity, their ziggurats rising like stairways to heaven, their palaces adorned with ceramic tiles and patterned reliefs. The Elamite language, unlike any other in the region, remains a mystery. It does not belong to the Semitic or Indo-European families, and though scholars have deciphered its script, much of its deeper grammar and meaning still eludes us. It is as though the voice of Elam survives behind a veil, always just beyond full understanding, like a dream recalled only in fragments. In their writing, we glimpse kings with names like Shutruk Nakunte and Untash Napirisha, rulers who prayed to gods with names unfamiliar and melodic. Their pantheon was rich and complex. Deities like Inshushinak, protector of Susa, who presided over justice and the underworld. Their temples were not mere places of worship, but sanctuaries of law, learning, and ritual. Inside, priests performed rites older than empires, casting incense into the air as chants rose like smoke toward the heavens. The Elamites were master craftsmen, working in bronze and gold, clay and stone. Their seals, carved with fine precision, told stories in miniature of myth and trade, of animals both real and imagined. They built subterranean tombs lined with painted bricks, buried their dead with care and reverence, and left behind tablets that spoke of kingship, devotion, and divine inheritance. Though often remembered as a regional power, the Elamites were not without ambition. In the 12th century BCE, King Shutruk Nakunte led his armies westward, plundering Babylon and returning home with its treasures, including the famous stele of Hammurabi's Code. This black basalt monument, carved centuries earlier, was brought to Susa and displayed as a trophy of conquest. It remains one of the most important legal documents in history, and a reminder that even the silent ones sometimes speak the loudest. But Elam wasn't defined by war. It was a land of resilience. Time and again, when empires rose and fell around them, the Elamites endured. They retreated into the mountains when needed, rebuilt their cities when burned, and re-emerged stronger each time. Their culture was fluid, open to outside influence, but never fully absorbed. They adopted cuneiform from the Akkadians, but wrote in their own tongue. They traded with their neighbours, but retained their identity. Elam was a thread running parallel to the great tapestry of Mesopotamian civilization. intertwined yet distinct. Their architecture reflected their values, grounded, symmetrical, and ceremonial. At Chorazanbil, one of the best preserved ziggurats in the world, you can still walk among the sacred terraces and feel the hush of ritual that once filled the space. Built by Untash-Napirisha in the 13th century BCE, this temple complex was dedicated to multiple gods, with altars, courtyards, and processional paths designed to honor the divine in many forms. The bricks are still inscribed with prayers. The wind still sings through the gaps, but no kingdom lasts forever. By the 6th century BCE, Elam's time had run its course. The rising Achaemenid Persians absorbed their lands and legacy, and Susa, once an Elamite jewel, became a Persian capital. The people of Elam faded into the broader stream of Iranian history. Their language disappeared, their gods fell silent, their monuments were buried by time, their names remembered only by the earth. And yet, the spirit of Elam lingers, in the mountains that rise like sleeping giants, in the ruins where owls now nest, in the artifacts that rest quietly in museum cases, still bearing the fingerprints of the hands that shaped them. The Elamites are not gone. They are simply quiet now, like a flame that has dimmed but not died. You stand once more among the broken walls of Susa. The sky has brightened to a soft blue, and the air carries the warmth of day. Somewhere, deep in the soil, old prayers lie dormant, and somewhere in your thoughts, a gentle voice speaks a language that no one fully understands. The guardians of the East have returned to sleep, their legacy held softly by the land they once called home. The stars have barely faded as the first streaks of dawn stretch across the high desert sky. You find yourself on the edge of a windswept plateau, overlooking a valley where the old Silk Road once wound its way between mountains and cities, oases and sands. The scent of camels, cedarwood, and spiced air lingers faintly. In the soft hush of morning, as merchants once stirred from canvas tents, and golden coins changed hands beneath awnings of silk, the Sogdians awaken once more. They were never an empire in the way we usually imagine. They built no vast army of conquest, laid no claim to distant shores, and yet their reach was profound, spanning the spine of Asia, from China to Byzantium, Persia to India. The Sogdians were traders, storytellers, and cultural emissaries, their names carried not by swords, but by the rhythmic clatter of caravans. Their homeland lay in what is now Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, nestled around the cities of Samarkand, Bukhara, and Panjakent. These cities were lush islands of colour and vitality, set against the vast deserts and towering mountains of Central Asia. Surrounded by rivers and orchards, the Sogdians cultivated not only grain and fruit, but ideas, weaving together languages, religions, and styles from every direction the wind would carry. They spoke Sogdian, an Iranian tongue, rich in nuance and adorned with elegant script. Their letters, painted on paper or carved into stone, have been found as far east as China's Gansu province and as far west as the sands of Syria. For centuries, Sogdian was the lingua franca of the Silk Road, a thread binding empires, merchants, and pilgrims across continents. Their genius lay in connection. They were not only traders of goods, they were carriers of culture. A Sogdian caravan might transport jade and lacquerware from China, glass and gold from the Roman world, spices from India, and fine silks in shimmering hues. But alongside the cargo came songs and stories, religious texts and philosophies, manners of dress and gesture. The Sogdians were, in many ways, the memory keepers of the road. They adopted and adapted faiths with ease and reverence. Many embraced Zoroastrianism, the ancient Persian religion of fire and order. Others followed Buddhism, brought from India by travelling monks, Manichaeism, Nestorian Christianity, and even early forms of Islam also found fertile ground in Sogdian hearts. These were people for whom identity was fluid, multifaceted, like the multicoloured silks they traded, woven from threads of many lands. Their cities were wonders of their own. In Panjakent, frescoes still cling to the walls of noble homes, vibrant with scenes of myth and celebration. Tigers and dragons leap across painted ceilings. Banquets spill with wine and song. In the glow of flickering lamplight, musicians play reed flutes and stringed lutes, and dancers swirl in flowing robes. These were lives filled not only with commerce, but with beauty. The Sogdians were skilled horsemen, clever diplomats, and fluent in the art of survival. They negotiated treaties with the Tang dynasty in China, served as envoys and translators, and even formed influential merchant colonies in foreign cities. In Chang'an, the great Chinese capital, entire districts pulsed with Sogdian life, complete with temples, markets, and performances that blended Eastern and Western styles. And yet, for all their reach, the Sogdians remained tethered to their roots. Family and clan were everything. A single merchant might travel thousands of miles, but letters and gifts would flow constantly back to the homeland, wrapped in cloth, sealed with wax, marked with the careful brushstrokes of home. In a world without telegraphs or trains, the Sogdians made communication a sacred act. Their influence was profound, yet quiet. It was in the adoption of paper in Persia, the adaptation of Indian iconography in Chinese Buddhist art, the inclusion of Persian fables in Chinese literature. The Sogdians did not conquer with armies. They conquered with ideas, colour and song. But history, ever shifting like the dunes, does not always favour those without walls. As Arab armies moved eastward and the Islamic caliphates expanded, the old Silk Road began to change. Sea trade routes began to rise. Caravans grew fewer. And by the 10th century, the heart of Sogdian culture had begun to fade. Their cities were abandoned or absorbed. Their temples fell into ruin. The Sogdian language slipped into silence, replaced by Persian and Arabic. Their frescoes crumbled, their letters were buried, and for a long time only fragments remained. Pottery shards, coins, bits of parchment tucked in desert caves. Yet the winds remember. On the old roads near Samarkand, you can still walk where merchants once led their camels, their bells jingling softly in the dusty air. You can still find fragments of their painted stories, still feel the heartbeat of a people who lived between the edges of empire and dreamed of distant stars. As the morning sun warms the stones beneath your feet, a quiet peace settles over the valley. The sky glows with promise, and the ancient road stretches ahead, half lost, half remembered. The Sogdians, gentle masters of trade and tales, slip once more into the hush of time, carried softly on the breeze, like silk unfurling in the dawn. The sun rises slowly over the Ethiopian highlands, casting a golden hush across rolling hills and steep ridges blanketed with soft morning mist. Below, in a gentle valley, slender obelisks pierce the sky, silent sentinels of a world long vanished. Birds call from the trees, their songs drifting over ancient stone foundations and overgrown terraces. You walk between monoliths etched with timeless symbols, and the whispers of Aksum begin to stir. Once, this was one of the great empires of the ancient world, Aksum, regal, powerful, and luminous. Nestled in the Horn of Africa, it emerged in the first few centuries of the Common Era as a beacon of trade, innovation, and culture, and yet, In most modern tellings of empire, Aksum is barely a footnote. But step quietly through its remains, and you will feel its weight, not in ruins, but in presence. It is here, still, not gone, but waiting. The kingdom's roots reach deep into the fertile soil of northern Ethiopia and Eritrea, where seasonal rains fed rivers and terrace farms thrived. The people of Aksum cultivated teff, barley, and wheat, and they raised cattle, carved tools, and built cities from stone. Their capital, also called Aksum, was a city of grandeur, home to palaces, reservoirs, bathhouses, and soaring obelisks that stood as markers of power, lineage, and belief. The tallest of these monoliths once reached 33 meters into the sky, carved from a single piece of granite. Each bore intricately chiseled details, faux doors, windows, and decorative panels, as if the stone itself were meant to echo the structures of the living. These obelisks were not mere markers, they were symbolic stairways, bridging the earth with the afterlife. Kings were laid to rest beneath them, their legacies sealed beneath layers of meaning and stone. Aksum stood at the crossroads of trade routes that connected the Roman Empire, India, Arabia, and the African interior. From the port of Adulis on the Red Sea, goods flowed in and out of the kingdom like lifeblood. Ivory, gold, frankincense, exotic animals, and enslaved people traded for spices, textiles, glassware, and silver. Aksumite merchants spoke many tongues, their ships bearing sails stained by salt and sun. Their coinage, minted in gold, silver, and bronze, stands as a quiet marvel of economic sophistication. These coins bore the faces of kings and inscriptions in Ge'ez, the ancient language of Aksum. They circulated widely, reaching as far as Byzantium and India, confirming the kingdom's role as a major player in the global networks of its day. But Aksum was not only a merchant power, it was a spiritual one too. In the early 4th century, under the reign of King Azana, Aksum became one of the first empires in the world to adopt Christianity as its state religion. Long before the rise of Islam and just decades after the Roman Empire's conversion, Aksum's kings embraced the cross. Stone churches were raised, crosses were etched into coins, and the faith took root, shaped by local customs and liturgy that survive to this day. Ge'ez, the liturgical language of Aksumite Christianity, is still sung in Ethiopian Orthodox churches, a living echo of ancient devotion. It is a voice from a time when monks journeyed through the mountains carrying handwritten manuscripts, and saints were remembered with stories carved into wood and painted on hide. Yet even before its Christian era, Aksum's people worship deities tied to nature and sky, to the earth and its rhythms. Altars found in the ruins speak of older beliefs, of a sacrifice and ceremony beneath the open sky. The faiths of Aksum were layered, one era folded gently atop another, like silk over gold. Aksum's engineering was as remarkable as its faith. The city boasted a sophisticated dam and irrigation system, wells and cisterns designed to sustain its people even in dry seasons. The architecture blended function and grace, thick-walled palaces with central courtyards, columns of smooth stone, stairways winding toward shaded balconies. Here, life moved with the sun, slow, purposeful, and full of ritual, but the winds of time as always began to shift. The rise of Islam in the 7th century altered trade patterns across the Red Sea. The once thriving port of Adulis declined. Political unrest, environmental change, and soil exhaustion took their toll. Aksum began to withdraw, not in sudden collapse, but in quiet retreat into the highlands. The capital was gradually abandoned. The stones remained. Today, the town of Aksum is small, but sacred, Pilgrims visit its churches, believing that the Ark of the Covenant is hidden in a chapel guarded by a single monk. Monasteries cling to cliffs, psalms echo through the cool, starlit air, and in the fields just beyond, the obelisks still stand, tilted, cracked, but proud. They speak of a kingdom whose greatness was rooted not only in wealth, but in wisdom and grace. As the morning deepens, the light falls more fully upon the stone. You brush your hand across the cool surface of a fallen monolith, and for a moment you can feel the pulse of the past, steady, quiet, enduring. The kingdom of Aksum is not forgotten. It is carved into the earth, sung into the liturgy, carried in every breeze that passes through the highlands. And now, as the sun warms the hills and a gentle wind rustles through the acacia trees, the empire settles back into slumber. The traders, the priests, the kings, they are resting, but they are not gone. In the stillness of the highlands, the legacy of Aksum lingers like the cool shadow of an ancient stone. The sun is low in the sky, casting long golden rays across the sandstone cliffs of southern Jordan. You stand at the mouth of a narrow canyon, the Seq, where rose-colored walls rise high above you, smoothed by centuries of wind and water. The air is dry and warm, and your footsteps echo softly between the rocks. As you walk deeper into the gorge, the light narrows until, suddenly, it opens. Before you stands a facade carved from living stone, majestic, intricate, eternal. This is Petra, and the Nabataeans are near. They were masters of stone and sand, a people who built their empire not with conquest alone, but with commerce, wisdom, and water. The Nabataeans flourished in the harsh deserts of Arabia, taming an unforgiving land with ingenuity and grace. From the 4th century BCE to the 1st century CE, they forged a kingdom that bridged the Mediterranean world with the riches of Arabia and the East. Petra, their capital, was their masterpiece. Hidden in the heart of the desert, protected by cliffs and secrecy, and revealed only to those who knew its winding paths. Here, the Nabataeans carved temples, tombs, theatres and homes directly into the rose-red rock. The architecture reflected a fusion of cultures, Hellenistic flourishes, Mesopotamian symmetry, Arabian artistry, all blended with quiet elegance. But their true genius was in their control of water. In a land where rainfall was rare and the sun reigned supreme, the Nabataeans turned scarcity into abundance. They engineered a complex system of cisterns, dams, canals, and underground reservoirs. Rainfall was captured and stored, channeled into terraced gardens, public fountains, and private baths. Even in the driest seasons, Petra bloomed. The Nabataeans were nomads who had settled, but they never lost their love for the open road. They controlled the incense route, the vital trade artery that brought frankincense and myrrh from southern Arabia through their territory to the Mediterranean. Caravans laden with spices, perfumes, silk, and precious stones passed through their domain, guarded and taxed by Nabataean kings. In return, the kingdom grew wealthy and cosmopolitan. Their wealth, however, was quietly kept. The Nabataeans left behind few inscriptions boasting of conquest or divine rule. Instead, their legacy lies in rock-cut tombs and carefully buried texts, in the elegant curves of a sandstone column or the faded lines of a merchant's journal. They were people of the in-between, between east and west, between desert and mountain, between the known and the mysterious. Their script, an early form of Arabic, was graceful and looping, a written whisper carved into stone and parchment. Their gods, too, reflected their blending of worlds. Dushara, the god of the mountains, and Al-Uzza, the goddess of fertility and war, were worshipped in shrines both modest and grand. Altars dotted the cliffs, where priests once poured libations to the sky as incense curled upward into the desert air. The Nabataeans were not a people of empire in the traditional sense. Their cities were often open, their power built on networks of alliance and respect rather than domination. They negotiated with neighbours, traded with rivals, and adapted with ease. In art and language, in dress and ceremony, they absorbed what they needed and reimagined the rest. Yet no kingdom can remain hidden forever. As the Roman Empire expanded, its reach inevitably brushed against Nabataean borders. At first they coexisted. Trade flourished, cultures blended. Petra even hosted Roman-style theatres and colonnaded streets. But in 106 CE, under Emperor Trajan, the kingdom was annexed into the Roman province of Arabia Petraea. The Nabataean kings vanished. The royal line ended. Petra lived on for a time, still bustling, still beautiful. But slowly, the desert reclaimed it. Earthquakes shattered its buildings. Trade routes shifted to the sea. And one day, the city fell silent. By the Middle Ages, it had faded from memory in the Western world, its name little more than a rumour. Only the wind remained, moving softly through the Siik. And yet, the Nabataeans were never truly lost. In the early 19th century, European explorers rediscovered Petra, their astonishment echoing through journals and sketches. Since then, archaeologists have unearthed temples, inscriptions, water channels, and more. Each discovery a soft breath returning to the surface. Each grain of sand, a silent witness. Today, Petra is a wonder of the world. Visitors walk its paths beneath moonlight and sun. The treasury, that iconic facade, glows pink and gold in the changing light. But beyond the grandeur, there is still quiet. Still the spirit of the people who shaped the desert, who lived between wind and stone, and who whispered their legacy into the cliffs. Now, as twilight settles over the canyon, you turn back toward the Siik. The shadows stretch long and cool across the path, and the warm scent of stone fills the air. Somewhere behind you, the wind hums gently between columns and caverns, and you feel a presence, calm, enduring, unseen. The Nabataeans, the silent sculptors of the sands, return once more to sleep beneath their rose-red city, carried on the hush of desert wind and the memory of passing stars. The morning air is crisp as it rolls down the slopes of Mount Ararat. High above, snow clings to the summit, glinting softly in the golden light. Below, the land unfurls in shades of copper and emerald, rugged ridges, silent lakes, and valleys once lined with fortresses. The breeze carries the scent of juniper and old stone, and somewhere in the stillness, a voice long buried begins to stir. This is the land of Urartu, the mountain kingdom, the forgotten echo of power. Nestled between the Black Sea and the Iranian plateau, in the lands that today stretch across eastern Turkey, Armenia, and northwestern Iran, the kingdom of Urartu emerged in the shadow of giants. In the 9th century BCE, Assyria reigned to the south, and the Hittites had already faded into myth. But from the highlands came a new power, a people of mountain strongholds, stone inscriptions, and unyielding resilience. They called themselves the Biainili, but history knows them as the Urartians. Their name became linked with the land they ruled, a vast and varied territory where rivers carved through canyons and basalt cliffs watched over fertile plains. It was a kingdom both hidden and defiant, isolated enough to grow in its own image, yet bold enough to challenge the might of Assyria again and again. The Urartians were builders. Across the mountains, they raised fortresses of polished stone, perched like eagles' nests above the valleys. These citadels, at Erebuni, Tushpa, and Argishtikinili were constructed with remarkable skill. Cyclopean walls of basalt blocks fit seamlessly together, needing no mortar. From atop these heights, kings ruled with clarity and control, overseeing a realm that pulsed with life beneath the cliffs. Tushpa, their capital, stood on the shores of Lake Van, a great inland sea shimmering under sun and moon. Here, palaces and temples rose above the water, their walls inscribed with the deeds of kings. Massive canals carried snowmelt from the mountains into reservoirs, sustaining fields and orchards. The engineering was elegant, deliberate, designed to harness the mountains without scarring them. Urartian inscriptions, etched into rock faces and copper plates, speak in the tongue of the kingdom, a language related to Hurrian, sharp and syllabic, written in a cuneiform script borrowed and modified from Assyria. They tell of victories and dedications, of temples raised to the gods, and borders defended with valor. The words are formal, yet behind them lies a quiet pride, a sense of purpose carried in every line. Their religion too was shaped by the mountains. Chief among their gods was Haldi, a warrior deity often depicted standing on a lion, watching over the realm with unwavering gaze. To Haldi and the pantheon around him, the Urartians built temples of both grandeur and stillness. Sacred fires were lit, wine was poured, offerings were placed on altars beneath stars that gleamed cold and eternal above the peaks. The Urartians were not just warriors and builders, they were artisans. Their bronze work, especially, remains a marvel. Cauldrons and shields, belts and figurines have been uncovered from tombs and sanctuaries, each one detailed with mythic scenes, gods with wings, animals in motion, warriors locked in stylized battle. Their art was not ostentatious, but powerful, a reflection of the landscape they called home. Their economy thrived on agriculture and animal husbandry. The steppe terraces of their farms mirrored the mountains, and cattle and sheep grazed on grassy slopes. Urartian towns hummed with life. Blacksmiths, weavers, potters, scribes, each one part of a society grounded in its land, shaped by altitude and stone. But Urartu was never free from conflict. For much of its history, it stood toe-to-toe with Assyria, sometimes as rival, sometimes as prey. Battles were fought in the valleys, along mountain passes, and near sacred lakes. Cities were taken, then rebuilt. Treaties were signed, then broken. Yet Urartu endured, stubborn and strong, retreating into the highlands when pressed, emerging again when the time was right. And then, in the 6th century BCE, the kingdom faded. The Medes swept through the region, or perhaps internal decline and shifting alliances loosened Urartu's grip. The records fall silent. The fortresses crumbled. The names of kings ceased to echo across the stone. And soon, all that remained were scattered ruins and half-remembered tales. Yet Urartu was not entirely forgotten. Its descendants lived on, absorbed into the cultures of Armenia and beyond. Its strongholds became the foundation of later cities. Its spirit, the mountain pride, the reverence for stone, the endurance through time, seeped into the bones of the land. And today, when you walk through the remains of Erebuni, near modern-day Yerevan, or stand atop the rocky heights of Van, you walk in their footsteps. You feel it in the wind that slides down from the snowline, in the shimmer of Lake Van at dusk, in the carved stones that rise from grassy soil like teeth of a sleeping god. The Urartians are still here, in the silence, in the architecture, in the landscape itself. And as the mountain air cools once more, and the light grows long across the peaks, the echoes from Ararat settle gently into the land. The fortress walls sleep, the gods rest, and the kingdom of Urartu, proud and patient, returns again to the stillness of stone and shadow. The sun rises slowly over the valleys of southern Mexico, casting warm light across the mountaintops of Oaxaca. Mist curls gently in the hollows below, and high above the valley floor, an ancient city greets the morning sky, Monte Albán, a city of temples and plazas carved into the mountaintop, stretches quietly across the flattened summit. Birds call out in the stillness, and the sound of wind through stone whispers the name of a people once great. The Zapotecs are stirring. Long before the rise of the Aztecs or the arrival of the Spanish, the Zapotec civilization thrived in these highlands. From around 500 BCE, they built one of the earliest and most enduring cultures in Mesoamerica. A people of astronomers, artists, priests, and kings. Their cities clung to the mountains, close to the sky, and their rituals reached toward the stars. Monte Albán, their crowning achievement, is unlike any city in the world. Perched atop a leveled ridge, it overlooks the valleys like a sentinel of time. Wide plazas stretch out into geometric harmony. Stone staircases descend from pyramid platforms. Carved monuments line the walkways. Figures etched in swirling forms, their limbs twisted in ritual expression. It is a city of silence now, but once it echoed with life, with drumbeats, chants, and the footsteps of barefoot priests. The Zapotecs were builders of stone and of time. Their calendar systems rivaled those of the Maya, tracking celestial movements with astonishing precision. They built observatories aligned with the sun and stars, and their rituals were bound to cosmic cycles, sowing and harvest, solstice and equinox. Time was sacred to them, a living force woven into the fabric of their lives. Their writing system, one of the earliest in the Americas, used glyphs carved on monuments and painted on codices. Though still only partially deciphered, these symbols speak of kings and rituals, of battles and gods. In them, we glimpse a world rich in meaning, a world where every stone bore a message, and every carving was a voice. The Zapotecs worshipped a pantheon of gods tied to fertility, rain, sun, and death. Kokihani, the god of light, and Kosichijo, the god of rain and lightning, were central to their rituals. Their ceremonies included offerings of maize, feathers, incense, and, on solemn occasions, human life. Yet their temples were not places of fear, but of balance. They sought harmony between earth and sky, between the living and the dead. The underworld, or Liobar, was ever present in Zapotec thought. Beneath the city of Mitla, a later Zapotec religious center, tombs and passageways mimic the journey to this other world. Intricate mosaic patterns decorate the walls, not with paint or carving, but with perfectly fitted stones, forming endless labyrinths in black and white. They are mazes for the spirit, silent prayers carved into architecture. Zapotec society was hierarchical but structured. Rulers, called big men or Zayaquila, governed both politically and spiritually. Below them were priests, artisans, farmers, and merchants. Women played key roles in commerce and ritual life. Markets bustled with color and trade. Cacao, textiles, obsidian, and pottery exchanged in the hum of daily life. Each town had its specialties, its rhythms, its gods. Art flourished in many forms. Painted urns with wide, staring eyes, turquoise mosaics, carved jade and obsidian, and delicate goldwork that glittered like fire in the sunlight. Their style was bold yet reverent, a visual language that mirrored the sacred and the everyday. Though Monte Albán eventually declined, the Zapotec culture endured. As other powers rose, The Mixtecs, the Toltecs, the Aztecs, the Zapotecs remained, adapting, trading, and preserving their traditions. They defended their valleys fiercely and negotiated their place in the shifting world with quiet strength. Even after the Spanish arrived, many Zapotec communities retained elements of their language, ritual, and identity. Today, the descendants of the Zapotecs still live in the valleys of Oaxaca. Their language, spoken by hundreds of thousands, carries echoes of ancient prayers. Their textiles are woven in patterns as old as the stones of Monte, Albán. Their festivals, rich with music and colour, reflect both pre-Hispanic roots and later traditions, blended into something uniquely enduring. Monte Albán, now an archaeological site, remains one of the most breathtaking in all the Americas. As you walk its plazas, the wind stirs gently through the grass. The stones are cool beneath your hands. In the quiet, you can almost hear the sound of sandals on steps, the murmur of a ritual, the low call of a conch shell welcoming the dawn. The city may be still, but it is not silent. It is said that the Zapotecs believed their ancestors emerged from trees, jaguars, and caves, born of nature, shaped by spirit. That belief still lingers in the landscape, in the twisting branches, the thick roots, the sun-warmed earth. The mountains remember. And now, as the morning sky grows brighter and the wind shifts over the high ridge, the temples of Monte Albán bask once more in golden light. The people who built them sleep quietly beneath the stone. The voices carved into walls remain. And the Zapotecs, keepers of time, sky, and spirit, return gently to the mountain's embrace. The early morning fog clings to the forested hills of Gyeongju like a silk veil. The trees stand hushed, their leaves still wet with dew, while dragonflies drift lazily over rice paddies below. You walk a winding path toward a gentle rise, where the earth swells into green-covered mounds, royal tombs sleeping quietly beneath the sky. Birds sing softly from the pines, and the echoes of ancient drums seem to ripple through the air. This is Silla, the golden kingdom of Korea, reborn in the morning mist. Once, this land was one of three kingdoms, Goguryeo, Baekje, and Silla, vying for power on the Korean peninsula. Among them, it was Silla, the southeastern kingdom, that would rise from obscurity to unify much of Korea and usher in a cultural renaissance. From the 1st century BCE until the 10th century CE, the Silla dynasty endured for nearly 1,000 years, quietly shaping a legacy that still lingers in the soil and soul of Korea. Silla began as a confederation of tribal communities, ruled by early kings whose names shimmer with legend: Hyokjeose, the founder born from an egg; Talhai, the wise traveller from distant lands. These stories, preserved in the Samguk Sagi, blend myth with memory, reminding us that history is often born from wonder. In its early days, Silla was modest, a kingdom of earthen ramparts, wooden halls, and small city-states nestled among the valleys. But over time, its power and prestige grew. By the 6th century, it had developed a centralized bureaucracy, sophisticated systems of law, and an aristocracy known as the Huabaek, whose council shaped the direction of the realm. And yet, it was not military might that defined Silla's golden age. It was beauty. The kingdom blossomed into one of the most refined and artistically rich cultures in East Asia. Nowhere is this clearer than in its capital, Gyeongju, known then as Seorabeol, a city of lotus ponds, elegant palaces, and quiet courtyards. Its streets echoed with the footfalls of scholars and monks, of artisans and nobles. Temples rose above tiled roofs, and gardens spilled with cherry blossoms in spring. Buddhism became the spiritual heart of the kingdom, introduced through trade and diplomacy with China and further developed by local monks and philosophers. Silla embraced the teachings with grace and depth. Monasteries flourished across the countryside, their pagodas rising like prayers into the sky. Among them stood Bulguksa, a temple of stone and serenity, where carved bridges led the faithful from the world of suffering to the land of paradise. Nearby, hidden within the hills, was Sogdians Grotto, a man-made cave sanctuary housing a majestic granite Buddha seated in meditation. His face, serene and calm, reflects perfect balance. Around him, sculpted bodhisattvas and celestial guardians rest in eternal stillness. For over 1,000 years, the chamber has remained, a sacred haven for silence and devotion. Silla's golden crowns, uncovered from royal tombs, are some of the most exquisite artifacts of the ancient world. Delicate bands of pure gold rise into tree-like antlers, symbols of life, divinity, and connection to the heavens. Adorned with jade pendants shaped like leaves and teardrops, these crowns shimmered in the torchlight of royal halls. They speak not only of power, but of reverence, a belief that the ruler was a bridge between earth and sky. Silla's people valued learning. Scholars studied Chinese classics, developed sophisticated calligraphy, and compiled annals of their history. Their poetry celebrated nature, love, and impermanence. Their music, known as hyangak, floated on the wind, lilting and slow, like the turning of leaves. Trade flourished along the seas. Silla's ships reached as far as Tangina and Japan. Porcelain silk, books, and ideas flowed through its harbours. Yet the kingdom remained distinct, blending foreign influence with native traditions, never losing its soul. In the 7th century, with help from the Tang dynasty, Silla unified much of the Korean peninsula, defeating Baekje and Goguryeo and entering its full golden age. For a time, it stood as a centre of learning and faith, culture and peace, a gentle beacon of civilization on the edge of the continent. But all kingdoms change. As the centuries passed, court intrigue grew. Local lords, or jijik, gained power and questioned the crown. Peasant uprisings flared. The elegance of Gyeongju gave way to unrest. And by the 10th century, the once glorious Silla dynasty yielded to the rise of Goryeo, another kingdom whose name would one day become Korea. Silla faded not in fire, but in mist, quietly, like its temples at dawn. Yet the spirit of Silla remains. In Gyeongju, the tombs still rise gently from the grass, like waves in the land. Pagodas still stand, lanterns still flicker in quiet shrines. And the people, the language, the soul of the nation, all still carry echoes of that golden age. Now, as the sun burns away the last of the morning mist, the tombs begin to glow in the soft light. A breeze stirs through the trees, and somewhere, in the hush, the sound of a distant flute seems to rise and fall like memory. The Silla kingdom, dreamers, poets, and philosophers of an age long past, returns gently to its slumber beneath the mountains, held in the silence of stone, sky, and time. The desert winds sweep softly over the plains of northern Afghanistan, where scattered stones lie half buried in golden sand. Beyond the horizon, snow-capped peaks shimmer in the distance, their outlines blurred by heat and history. In the quiet of the morning, the land feels vast, empty, and yet gently alive, as if listening. You stand amid the crumbled remains of a city once grand, where marble columns rose and silks fluttered in the breeze. This is Bactria, ancient, luminous and largely forgotten. Long ago, this region was a jewel of Central Asia. Bactria lay between mighty rivers and endless ranges in the fertile lands around what is now Balkh, a place once called the Mother of Cities. Here, empires met and mingled. Ideas crossed paths. Religions were born and reimagined. For centuries, Bactria served as a crossroads between East and West, a meeting place of languages, gods, and dreams. The earliest Bactrians lived during the Bronze Age, building fortified settlements and farming the land along the Amu Darya. But it was under Persian rule during the Achaemenid Empire that Bactria first entered written history. The Persian kings considered it a prized satrapy, rich in horses, grain, and gold. The people of Bactria were seen as both fierce and cultured, living among verdant fields and distant mountains. But it was in the wake of Alexander the Great's conquests that Bactria became something entirely new. In the 4th century BCE, Alexander swept through the region, toppling the Persian Empire and establishing control across Central Asia. Though resistance in Bactria was fierce, he eventually subdued the area and left behind a garrison of Greek settlers. Over time, these settlers intermarried, adapted, and built a culture uniquely their own. Thus was born the Greco-Bactrian kingdom, a place where marble temples stood beside Zoroastrian fire altars and statues of Apollo bore local features and garments. The Greco-Bactrians ruled from cities like Icannum, a gleaming metropolis on the Oxus River. Archaeological discoveries reveal colonnaded palaces, theatres, gymnasiums, and intricate mosaics. Inscriptions in Greek offer advice to young citizens, quoting lines from Delphic wisdom. But here, thousands of miles from Athens, Greek thought was being reinterpreted, reshaped by the land, its people, and its traditions. In Icannum, the king might speak fluent Greek, but consult with Buddhist monks. Sculptors blended Hellenistic realism with Eastern symbolism. Gold coins bore both Greek and Indian deities. It was not a clash of cultures, but a quiet conversation across generations, the soft blending of art, architecture, and belief. The Bactrian kings, like Diodotus and Menander, ruled over a diverse and ever-shifting population. Their armies included Iranians, Greeks, Indians, and Central Asians. Their diplomats corresponded with rulers as far as China and Egypt. Bactria became a hinge in the ancient world, swinging freely between civilizations and holding them together for a time. Perhaps nowhere is this cultural fusion more visible than in the emergence of Greco-Buddhism, a profound and graceful synthesis that would shape Buddhist art for centuries. When the Indo-Greek kings expanded into northern India, they patronized monasteries and helped spread the teachings of the Buddha. For the first time, the Buddha was represented in human form, not abstractly, but with a serene face, flowing robes, and noble posture drawn from Greek sculptural tradition. The influence traveled along the Silk Road, reaching as far as China, Japan, and beyond. But Bactria, like all crossroads, was vulnerable to the winds of change. The kingdom faced waves of invasion, from Saka nomads, Parthians, and eventually the Kushans, who would build their own powerful empire on Bactrian soil. The cities were sacked, the temples abandoned, and the Greek language slowly faded into memory. Icannum fell, its columns crumbled, its theatres grew quiet. For centuries, Bactria lay hidden beneath layers of dust, forgotten by all but the mountains and the wind. Only fragments remained, coins buried in desert sands, statues shattered in temples no longer remembered. And yet, Bactria left an invisible legacy. It showed the world what could be built in the space between empires, not just kingdoms, but bridges of understanding. It proved that beauty and belief could merge, that ideas could cross deserts, that art could speak in more than one tongue. Today, the ruins of Iconium lie quiet once more, watched over by shepherds and shifting skies. Few walk its paths, yet those who do speak of a strange serenity there, of carved Corinthian capitals bathed in eastern light, of forgotten inscriptions glowing gold in the twilight, a place where time folds softly. As you stand now in this ancient place, the wind stirs the dry grass at your feet. A single bird calls overhead. The sky is wide and open, the kind of sky that carries echoes. Somewhere, perhaps in the silence between thoughts, you can still hear it, the murmur of philosophers beside the Oxus, the whisper of silk traders on the road to China, the chant of monks beneath Greek arches. And so, as the final light of day melts into the distant hills, the Bactrian kingdom rests once more. It fades not in defeat, but in grace, remembered not by monuments, but by the gentle blending of worlds. The crossroads have emptied, but the footprints remain. The stars blink softly overhead, ancient and unchanged, and Bactria returns to sleep beneath them, quiet, luminous, and never truly lost. Now, as the stars rise over distant lands and the hush of night deepens, our journey through forgotten empires draws to a peaceful end. From the storm-walled cities of the Hittites to the wind-carved tombs of the Nabataeans, from mountain fortresses and jungle temples to golden crowns and desert crossroads, we have wandered gently through the long-lost chapters of human history, guided by the soft echoes of those who came before us. These were not empires remembered in textbooks or shouted in legend. They were quieter, subtler, woven into the soil, the stone, the stars. Their roads may be overgrown, their names half remembered, but tonight they have stirred once more, not to demand our awe, but to remind us that even the most delicate threads of the past can hold a world of wonder. So, if you've enjoyed this tranquil journey through time, I invite you to like the video and subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss any future explorations through history's hidden corners. Wherever you are, thank you for listening, and until next time, sleep well.